One human student, one forbidden creature, and a secret that could tear open the sky itself. When Jonas Merrick touched the strange device hidden beneath the bronze scales of a long-extinct dragon, he unlocked a chain of events that would shatter the rules of time. In a world where the Galactic Council controls every moment, Jonas is about to break the loop and face a choice that will change the fate of two worlds forever. If you are new to the channel, then please subscribe to the channel and like the video and tell us where are you watching from. Now, let's jump into the story. Jonas Merrick walked with his head slightly lowered as he moved through the gleaming corridors of the Interstellar Academy of Celestera. At 15 Earth years old, he was the only human in the most advanced learning institution in the quadrant. His navy blue backpack hung heavy on his shoulders, and his plain mustard yellow shirt stood out among the flowing robes and color-shifting uniforms of the alien students. Being human here meant standing out in ways he didn't want. Whispers followed him in nearly every hallway. Some were curious, most were dismissive. The tall Sathrians, with their 4 eyes, barely looked at him unless it was to comment on how primitive his species was. The glass-skinned Ilvari flickered their lights in mocking patterns when he passed. Jonas had learned that ignoring them was easier than trying to answer every insult. The academy was a marvel of technology. Its domed courtyards contained entire ecosystems, each one a carefully crafted blend of alien plants and artificial weather systems. Jonas liked to walk through them between classes. It was one of the few times he felt calm in this place. Today, the light in the biodome courtyard was warm and golden, simulating a late afternoon on some distant Earth-like world. As he passed the east entrance, his attention caught on a movement near the edge of a cluster of tall, silver-leafed ferns. Something was hiding there, watching him. Jonas slowed his steps. At first, he thought it might be one of the Academy's programmed wildlife drones. But then he saw the gleam of scales and the curve of a small wing. The creature was no bigger than a large cat, but its shape was unmistakable. It had bronze wings folded close to its body, a ridged back lined with small spines, and a narrow snout. Jonas's heart skipped a beat. The illustrations in his xenobiology textbook came rushing back to him. This was a juvenile temporal drake, a species believed to be extinct for more than 300 standard years. He crouched down slowly, careful not to startle it. The drake's eyes were a deep, molten gold with vertical pupils. They watched him with an intelligence that was hard to ignore. Jonas remembered the Academy's strict rule against feeding unregistered wildlife. But he also remembered the nutrient bar in his pocket, saved from breakfast. Moving slowly, he took it out and broke off a piece. "You must be hungry," he said softly. His voice was barely louder than a whisper. He held out his hand, palm up, with the food resting on it. The drake sniffed the air, its nostrils flaring. It stepped forward cautiously, each movement deliberate. When it reached his hand, it snatched the food quickly and retreated a step, chewing with slow precision. Jonas couldn't help but smile. He offered another piece. This time, the drake approached with less hesitation. Its scales shimmered under the artificial sunlight. Dot! Catching flashes of copper and gold, its small claws clicked lightly against the stone path. Jonas felt a strange connection forming, something unspoken yet real. "I guess you need a name," he murmured. After a moment's thought, he said, "Ember. You look like fire caught in motion." The drake made a soft, rumbling sound in its chest, a noise that almost felt like approval. As Ember finished the last piece of food, Jonas felt a sudden, sharp sensation in his mind. It was as if a second layer of sight had opened, showing him a vision that was not entirely his own. He saw a vast sky filled with dragons, hundreds of them, circling above the academy. The sound of their wings and roars filled the air. And then, just as quickly, the vision was gone. Jonas blinked and looked at Ember. The drake stared back at him, calm and steady, as if nothing had happened. He rubbed the back of his neck, unsure whether what he'd seen was real or just his imagination. The sound of the Academy's class signal reached him. It wasn't a bell, but a soft, resonant pulse that seemed to echo in the mind rather than the ears. Jonas stood reluctantly. "I'll see you tomorrow," he promised. Ember tilted its head slightly, almost like it understood. As Jonas walked away, he couldn't shake the strange feeling the encounter had left him with. There had been something deliberate in the way the drake had watched him, something purposeful. He wondered if anyone else knew it was here. Students passed him in the corridor, some giving him the usual side glances, others ignoring him entirely. But Jonas's thoughts stayed on the creature. He thought about the shimmer of its scales, the sharpness of its eyes, and the strange vision that had taken over his mind for those few seconds. He reached his next class, a lecture hall filled with alien students of every shape and size. The walls displayed holographic star maps, and the instructor, a tall, insect-like Zellerin, was already speaking about gravitational anomalies in the outer sectors. Jonas sat down, but his attention drifted almost immediately. His hand moved across the page of his tablet, sketching the shape of Ember's wings, the angle of its horns, the line of its tail. By the end of the lecture, he had filled the screen with small details he hadn't realized he remembered. Patterns in the scales, the gleam in its eyes, the way its claws curved slightly inward. He stared at the drawing, wondering why the memory was so vivid. That night, lying in his small dorm room, Jonas dreamed of Ember. Not just Ember alone, but a sky full of temporal drakes, their wings blocking out the artificial sun of the biodome. In the dream, he could hear them calling to him, though the words were not in any language he knew. And when he woke, his heart was pounding, the image of those golden eyes still clear in his mind. Jonas didn't yet understand it, but the moment he'd met Ember, something had shifted. The quiet, predictable days of avoiding trouble were over. Something was beginning, and it had started with a small, bronze-winged creature hiding in the ferns. Jonas woke the next morning feeling uneasy. His dream about Ember still clung to him like a shadow that refused to fade. He dressed quickly, pulling on the same mustard-yellow shirt he had worn the day before. Halfway through buttoning it, he froze. He was certain he had placed it in the sonic laundry unit last night. The thought felt strange, like a puzzle piece that didn't fit, but he pushed it aside and grabbed his backpack. The corridors of the academy were as crowded and noisy as ever. Students of every imaginable species moved between classes, their voices mixing into a low hum. Jonas kept his head down, weaving through the flow of traffic, when a tall, scaled Gathrin stepped into his path with a sneer. Jonas sidestepped without breaking stride. He didn't even need to think about it. The insult that followed was word for word the same as yesterday. A chill ran through him. It was as if the moment had already happened. He reached into his pocket for the nutrient bar he always saved for later, except he didn't remember taking one from the cafeteria this morning. Yet here it was, in his hand. He tightened his grip on it and headed straight for the biodome courtyard. Ember was waiting in the same spot among the silver-leafed ferns. The bronze shimmer of the drake's scales caught the artificial sunlight, and those molten gold eyes locked on him instantly. Jonas crouched down and held out a piece of the bar. Ember stepped forward, accepting the food with surprising gentleness. As Jonas fed the drake, his gaze shifted to something he hadn't noticed before. Tucked behind Ember's right ear, partially hidden beneath overlapping scales, it had smooth edges and a faint, rhythmic glow. Jonas leaned closer. The pulse of light seemed to match his own heartbeat. Curiosity got the better of him, and he reached out carefully. Ember tensed but didn't move away. When his fingertips brushed the device, a sudden rush of energy surged into him. The courtyard dissolved into a blur of overlapping images. Jonas saw himself feeding Ember not once, but dozens of times. Each scene slightly different. The angle of the light, the position of the drake, the number of students passing in the background. In every version, the moment ended the same way, with him looking into those golden eyes. The visions vanished as quickly as they had appeared, leaving Jonas breathing hard and gripping the nutrient bar like it was an anchor. A voice cut through the air, sharp and precise. "Jonas Merrick, step away from that creature immediately." He turned to see Professor Eltris gliding toward him. The professor's form shimmered, shifting between translucent and solid, as if they existed only partially in the present moment. Their eyes were deep and reflective, carrying the weight of someone who had seen far too many centuries. "What is it?" Jonas asked, standing reluctantly. Ember took a cautious step back into the ferns. Professor Eltris's voice was calm, but edged with concern. "That is a temporal drake, and it is not supposed to be here. It belongs to a different point in the time stream. Your interaction with it could already have caused significant disruptions." Jonas hesitated. "I just fed it. That's all." The professor tilted their head and touched the device near its cranial ridge. "Yes? That device is a temporal anchor. It allows the drake to navigate and survive in different timelines. Tampering with it is not a small matter." Before Jonas could reply, a heavier presence filled the courtyard. Lord Marith, the headmaster, ... approached with measured steps. His tall frame was draped in a dark robe that shimmered with subtle patterns of authority. His eyes, 3 of them arranged in a narrow line, fixed on Jonas with cold focus. "What has he done?" Marath asked, his voice low but dangerous. Professor Eltris's shifting form wavered. "His chrono aura is already showing signs of instability. I believe he has entered a loop." Marath's gaze hardened. "A human causing a temporal loop in my academy? The council will hear of this. Perhaps now they will see that your kind is not ready for integration." Jonas opened his mouth to protest, but before he could, the air around him seemed to ripple. The courtyard blurred, sounds stretched and warped, and then snapped back into clarity. He found himself walking down the same corridor he had traveled earlier that morning. The same mustard yellow shirt, the same weight of his backpack, the same Gathrin stepping into his path with the same insult. This time, Jonas didn't just feel déjà vu, he knew. The day was repeating. He turned sharply toward the biodome, his mind racing. Ember was there again, waiting in the same spot. Jonas crouched down, meeting those golden eyes. "This isn't an accident, is it?" he said quietly. "You're here for a reason." Ember tilted its head and took a deliberate step closer. The drake pressed its scaled head into Jonas's hand, guiding his fingers to the temporal anchor. When he touched it again, the visions came, but now they were sharper, more focused. He saw Ember in full maturity, soaring with hundreds of other drakes. He saw planets under siege, skies filled with fire, and a vast fleet that threatened worlds, including Earth. He saw Ember's journey through time to find him. Not just any human, but one with a rare temporal resonance that could break the loop and trigger the arrival of the drakes when they were most needed. As the images faded, Jonas felt the truth settle into him. The loop wasn't a trap. It was a buildup. Every repetition brought the moment closer to something called the convergence. Ember stepped back, watching him intently. Jonas exhaled slowly, his mind already moving toward a decision he knew would change everything. The Drake had a purpose here, and so did he. Jonas sat on the edge of his narrow dorm bed, staring at the floor. The images Ember had shown him earlier that day replayed in his mind, like scenes from a film he couldn't pause. A sky filled with dragons, a planet under siege, the Council watching silently as worlds burned. He understood now that the loop was not random. Each cycle was building towards something. The convergence, and he was somehow the key. He rubbed his hands together, trying to think. Waiting for the loop to end on its own wasn't an option. Professor Eltris had already warned him that timeline instability could spiral into collapse. Lord Mareth clearly wanted him removed from the Academy, maybe even from galactic space entirely. If he left the problem alone, the Council would likely reset everything and erase Ember's mission before it could succeed. Ember needed him to act. Jonas leaned back against the wall, closing his eyes. He remembered the faint pulse of the temporal anchor against his fingers. He remembered how the energy from it had felt, like a signal trying to push outward, but not quite breaking through. That was it. The signal needed to be stronger. He opened his eyes, a plan forming in his mind. The Academy had one of the most advanced temporal shield networks in the quadrant. It was designed to protect against timeline tampering and outside interference. If he could reverse its function, even for a few seconds, it could act as a massive amplifier for Ember's signal. The convergence could happen early, before the Council had time to react. But getting access to the shield systems was not simple. The control center was locked behind layers of security and positioned in a restricted sector of the Academy. He would need tools, codes, and a distraction big enough to keep attention off him. Jonas pulled up his tablet and began mapping the layout of the Academy from memory. The engineering wing connected to the temporal sciences lab through a maintenance corridor. If he timed it right, he could move between them without being seen. He made a list in his head of what he'd need: a power cell strong enough to feed the anchor, a frequency tuner to align the signal, and the access codes to the shield controls. He would also need Ember's cooperation. The next loop started just as he expected. The corridor, the Gathrin, the insult. Jonas walked past without a word, already moving toward the biodome courtyard. Ember was there, waiting as if the Drake knew exactly what he had decided. "I think I know how to help you." Ember's golden eyes fixed on him. The Drake stepped closer, lowering its head so the temporal anchor was in clear view. Jonas reached out, touching it again. This time, the images came not as a flood, but as a steady stream. He saw the Academy's shield grid, glowing like a web of light over the biodome. He saw how the temporal energy could flow through it if the frequency was adjusted. He saw Ember surrounded by dozens of others, the sky breaking open to let them through. "Then it's settled," Jonas said. "We do this on the next cycle." He spent the rest of the loop preparing. During engineering practicum, he accidentally shorted a console, giving him the chance to pocket a compact power cell while the instructor was distracted. In temporal sciences, he asked Professor Eltris a series of sharp questions about frequency harmonics, managing to glimpse the shield control codes on the professor's open datapad. He memorized them before the professor could notice. Between classes, he slipped into an unused maintenance room and located a small frequency tuner. It wasn't designed for large-scale amplification, but with a few adjustments, it would work for what he needed. He tested the connections quickly, satisfied when the readings stabilized. Jonas knew the risks. If Lord Mareth caught him, the Council wouldn't just expel him, They might erase his presence from the timeline entirely. But if he succeeded, Ember's call would reach every temporal drake across the stream. As the day moved forward, Jonas noticed changes in the loop. Small things. A few students who normally ignored him were watching from a distance. The artificial sky flickered once, showing a faint ripple of energy, and his wristband chronometer occasionally skipped backward a second or two before correcting itself. The loop was getting unstable. It was time. That night, Jonas sat awake in his dorm, waiting for the reset. When the morning came and the familiar events began again, he moved with precision. Corridor, Gathrin, insult, biodome. Ember was ready. Jonas crouched down and held up the modified power cell and tuner. "Today's the day," he said. Ember lowered its head, letting him attach the tuner to the anchor. The device clicked into place, its lights shifting from silver to a steady blue. "When the shields shift, you'll feel it," Jonas explained. "That's when you send the signal." The plan was simple but dangerous. He would enter the shield codes from the maintenance console near the biodome. It was connected to the main system through a secondary node, giving him a narrow window to adjust the frequency without tripping every alarm at once. As he worked, the console's interface flickered. Lines of alien script scrolled faster than his eyes could follow. His fingers moved quickly, entering the code sequence he had memorized. The air in the courtyard seemed to thicken. A low hum vibrated under the stone path. Ember's temporal anchor glowed brighter, its pulse matching the rhythm of the modified power cell. "It's working," Jonas said under his breath. He confirmed the last input and triggered the frequency shift. Somewhere above them, the Academy's shield grid changed tone, opening for the first time in decades. Ember's eyes blazed. The drake released a sharp, ringing call that cut through the air like a blade. Jonas could feel the energy ripple outward, stretching far beyond the biodome. He didn't know if the council could feel it yet, but he knew the drakes could. The moment Ember's call left the courtyard, the air above the biodome began to ripple. It was subtle at first, like heat rising from a road. Then the shimmer deepened, twisting into a whirl of light and shadow. Jonas stepped back, his eyes fixed on the sky as the first dragon emerged through the tear. Its wings were massive, catching the artificial sunlight in flashes of silver and gold. Behind it came another, then 5 more, then dozens. Each arrival shook the air with the heavy beat of wings and the deep, resonant sound of their roars. The students in the courtyard froze, some backing away, others rooted in place as the impossible unfolded over their heads. Within minutes, the sky above the Academy was filled. Hundreds of temporal drakes wheeled in formation, their scales gleaming in colors Jonas had no names for. The sound of their voices was not chaotic, it was ordered, like a chorus built from 1,000 separate tones. Ember grew in size as the others arrived, the golden glow in its eyes intensifying. It stepped forward, positioning itself between Jonas and the entrance to the courtyard. A sharp, commanding voice rang out. Jonas Merrick. Lord Merith strode into the open space, his robe's pattern shifting to a deep, furious crimson. Behind him trailed Professor Eel, their shimmering form more unstable than usual. "What have you done?" Merith demanded, his 3 eyes fixed on Jonas. "You have breached temporal security, destabilized the shields, and invited a species the Council has deliberately kept apart from this era." Jonas stood his ground. "I've brought them here because you were keeping them out for the wrong reasons. The Council isn't protecting the timeline, it's controlling it. Ember showed me what's coming. They're here to help us survive it." Merith's voice dropped to a dangerous calm. "You think you understand the scope of what you've unleashed? These creatures are weapons. They will tear this academy apart if I give the order." Before Jonas could reply, a shadow fell over the courtyard. The largest of the drakes descended, landing with a force that made the ground tremble. Its wings folded in a slow, deliberate motion, and its head lowered until its eyes, ancient and steady, met Jonas's. In his mind, Jonas heard the voice, deep and clear. "The convergence is complete. The timelines are aligned. Now, the choice must be made." Jonas swallowed. "What choice? You may leave with us into the stream and return to your world with the knowledge you have gained. We will help prepare your people for what approaches. Or you may stay, keep the council in check here, and guard the convergence point from within." The words hidden with their weight. Leaving meant going home, seeing Earth again, and warning humanity about the threat Ember had shown him. Staying meant remaining in a place that treated him as an outsider, but also holding the key to protecting the Drake's presence in this era. Marith stepped forward. "This is your final warning. Stand down, or you and your creature will be erased from the timeline." Ember let out a low, rumbling growl, the sound vibrating through Jonas's bones. Jonas looked from Marith to the vast gathering of dragons overhead. He thought of the loops, the visions, the countless resets that had led to this moment. All of it had been building toward a decision. He turned to Ember. "If I go with you, will some of your kind stay here?" "Yes," Ember's voice echoed in his mind. "We will leave guardians in this time, but your presence in your own world will ensure we are not forgotten and that your people are ready when the day comes." Jonas nodded slowly. "Then I'm going home." A ripple of surprise passed through the crowd of students. Marith's expression darkened further. "You think you can simply walk out of here?" "Not walk," Jonas said, stepping toward Ember. "Fly." He climbed onto the drake's back, the bronze scales warm beneath his hands. Ember spread its wings, the motion stirring the air into a powerful gust. The great drake above them took to the air, and the rest began to move in coordinated arcs, forming a spiraling pattern that pointed toward the open rift in the sky. Marith shouted something to the guards. But before they could act, a ring of drakes dropped from the air, surrounding Jonas and Ember in a living wall of wings and flame. Professor Eltras's voice reached him, softer than before. "Merrick, whatever you see there, remember that every timeline is shaped by the smallest choices." Jonas gave a short nod. "Then I'll make this one count." With a powerful leap, Ember launched into the air, the ground falling away beneath them. The wind tore past Jonas's face as they climbed higher, following the spiral of dragons toward the rift. The light grew brighter, the hum of energy building until it filled every part of him. As they crossed into the opening, the courtyard below became a distant memory. The stars stretched before them, not fixed in place, but shifting in endless, flowing patterns. Jonas realized they weren't just moving through space. They were moving through time itself. Ember's voice came again. "Welcome to the stream. Your journey begins now." Behind them, the rift began to close. The academy and Lord Marith faded from sight, and Jonas knew that whatever happened next, the loop was over. But the real fight was only just beginning.